I don't know how much time passed before I finally spoke. Ethan was driving, hands gripping the wheel with white knuckles, and his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. The car sped down the winding road, the trees blurring past us like dark ghosts in the night. We hadn't spoken since we left the cabin. What could we possibly say? How could we explain what had just happened? I could still feel the chill in my bones, the smell of cooked food hanging in the air, that awful, still woman staring at me with eyes that would never blink. "We need to go back," I heard myself whisper. Ethan turned sharply, his face pale under the dim light of the dashboard. "What? Are you crazy?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure myself why I said it. The words had slipped out before I could stop them. But there was something pulling me back. Something that wasn't just curiosity. It was a nagging sensation that we hadn't uncovered everything, that the cabin, the shadow we saw, was calling to us. I know it sounds insane, but I can't stop thinking about it. About her, the woman in the cabin. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened, and I could see his thoughts racing. Mia, that was not normal. That wasn't a cabin. It was like some kind of, I don't know, a nightmare. But the car, I insisted, the Toyota, it wasn't just left there by some crazy person. The phone was ringing. Someone was living there, or had been. I leaned forward, staring out the windshield as the trees closed in on either side, the darkness growing more oppressive. I don't think we should just leave. I need to know what happened. Why? His voice cracked. Why do you need to know? What if we've seen enough? What if it's too late? I finished for him. What if it's already too late? We both fell silent after that. The road ahead stretched out, empty and endless. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew we couldn't just leave. There were pieces of that place, pieces of her, that wouldn't let us go. The question gnawed at me, gnawed at Ethan. We had to go back. We had to understand what it was we'd found, or perhaps what had found us. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands loosening slightly on the wheel. All right, we go back, but we're not staying. I'm not going in there. No way. I nodded, though my heart pounded in my chest, already anticipating what we would find. Or perhaps what would find us. There was something off about that place. A wrongness that wasn't just a taxidermied woman or the stale air, but something deeper. A feeling that the cabin itself was alive, breathing, waiting. We didn't speak again as we made our way back down the familiar dirt road, the headlights of our car cutting through the dark. As we neared the cabin, the world seemed to shift. The trees felt darker, the air heavier, as though the very land was holding its breath. When we reached the driveway, the Toyota Camry was still there, parked in the exact same spot. Nothing had changed. The cabin stood silent in the distance, the lights from our car casting eerie shadows over its rotting wooden walls. I could still smell the faint remnants of cooked food in the air, like the house had been frozen in time. And I felt it, just as I had before, like something else was waiting for us, something unseen. I turned to Ethan, whose face was pale with fear. "Stay in the car," I whispered. "I'll just take a look." "You're crazy." "Mia, no, don't." "I won't go in," I reassured him, my voice shaking. "I just need to see." He gave me one last pleading look, but he didn't try to stop me. I could see that he was torn, desperate for answers, just as much as I was. And so I left the car. The cold night air bit at my skin, the ground beneath my boots soft and wet with dew. The cabin loomed ahead, the windows dark and hollow, but I couldn't help but feel drawn toward it. The closer I got, the more my breath quickened. There was a heaviness in the air, as though the land itself was warning me to stay away. But I couldn't turn back now. I had to know. I approached the front door again, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. To my surprise, it turned easily under my touch. The door creaked open, and the smell of cooked food hit me again. The table was still set, the dishes still steaming, as though someone had just finished their meal. But no one was there. I stepped inside. Everything felt frozen in time. The dinner table in the center of the room was laid with plates of food, untouched but fresh, as though waiting for someone to sit down. The chairs, arranged perfectly, gave the illusion that the family had just stepped away. but there were no signs of life. Not a single person in sight. The taxidermied woman still stood at the far end of the room, her hollow eyes staring at me. It was as if she were waiting for something too, something I couldn't comprehend. But this time there was something different in the air. A sensation, a shift, as though the house were breathing in sync with me, as though it recognized my presence. I took a deep breath, my eyes flicking around the room. And then I saw it, on the far wall, a faded, yellowed photograph of a family. There they were, a woman, a man, and 2 small children. But they weren't smiling. No, they were staring at me with those same cold, lifeless eyes that matched the taxidermied woman. The woman in the photograph was wearing the same clothes as the figure in the room. Same hair, same posture. I felt my heart race. My fingers trembled as I reached the photograph. But something pulled me back, a whisper in the air that froze me in place. I couldn't quite understand it, but there was something wrong about those eyes. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. "Ethan," I called out, my voice quivering. But there was no answer. The air was thick, oppressive. The house seemed to be alive, pulsing with a strange energy. My mind raced, tried to make sense of what I was seeing. But the longer I stood there, the more disoriented I became. It was as though the room itself had shifted, the walls closing in, the shadows growing longer. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. But as I stepped back toward the door, I saw something in the corner of my eye, a shadow, too large to be human, moving slowly toward me. It was a figure of man, his form shifting in and out of the darkness. And then I knew the house wasn't empty. It was filled with them, the ones who had been trapped here, and they weren't going to let me go. I ran. The door burst open, and I stumbled out into the night, gasping for breath. My eyes locked on the car, where Ethan was now standing, his face pale, his expression terrified. He must have seen it too. The shadow, the presence. It wasn't just a feeling, it was real. I didn't look back as I rushed toward him, but I could feel it, them following, watching. When we were finally in the car and speeding away, I could still hear the faintest sound of the phone ringing, just as we had heard before. The hollow cabin was not just a place. It was a trap, a doorway, and we had been the ones who opened it. In 2018, I was known for my solitary hikes in the mountains. There's something about the stillness of nature that speaks to me in ways nothing else can. I had ventured through many forests, scaled many peaks, and walked miles in the solitude that only the wild can offer. But on one particularly strange day, the pull of a new adventure led me to Greenleaf Forest. It was an odd choice, especially considering the heavy thunderstorm rolling in. Most people would have stayed indoors, perhaps curled up with a book and a hot drink. But not me. The storm was just a background to what felt like an invitation from the forest itself. I arrived at the edge of the forest as the first drops of rain fell, the sky darkening with thick clouds. The air was heavy with anticipation. The trees loomed over me, their twisted branches almost clawing at the sky, like something ancient had been waiting for me to arrive. The atmosphere was eerie, but it felt oddly peaceful, as though the storm had parted just for me. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the mist began to rise. At first, it was a light veil, clinging to the branches and creeping along the ground. But soon it thickened, swirling around my legs and obscuring the trail ahead. I didn't mind. The forest was beautiful in its otherworldly way, and the mist only added to its mystique. Still, I had no sense of how far I'd traveled. I was lost, but strangely, it didn't bother me. I was used to wandering off the beaten path. Hours passed before I stumbled upon something that broke the otherwise natural rhythm of the woods. A cabin. Its silhouette was barely visible through the fog, but there was no mistaking the structure. It looked abandoned, old and decaying. Despite the feeling of unease creeping up my spine, something about it drew me in. It wasn't just a cabin itself, but the pull of curiosity. I needed to know what lay inside. I approached, the sound of my boots crunching on the wet, leaves the only noise in the otherwise silent forest. The door was cracked open, hanging by one hinge. I paused, listening to the storm outside as it howled. But there was no answer from the cabin. With a steadying breath, I stepped inside. The air inside was colder than outside, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the chill of the earth over the years. The silence inside was deafening. It was a kind of silence that wraps around you, suffocating every thought and making every sound feel distant, even when it's happening right next to you. I took a step forward, the floor creaking under my weight. My heart pounded a little faster. There was something wrong here. I could feel it. Suddenly, from the corner of the room, a figure emerged out of the shadows. A woman, her skin pale and her hair wild, hung loosely around her face. Her eyes were wide, filled with pain so raw that it seemed to emanate from her very soul. She was emaciated, her bones visible beneath the thin layer of skin, and her clothes were ragged, torn from years of decay. But what struck me most was her face. It was twisted in agony, her mouth stretched in a silent scream. I froze, unable to look away. The room felt like it was closing in on me, and all I could do was stare at her. Then, to my horror, she spoke. But it wasn't her voice I heard. It was mine. "Don't follow me," the voice echoed through the room, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me. It sounded so perfectly like me, but wrong, as though my own words were being twisted into something unnatural. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. My heart raced in my chest. I wanted to run, but my body refused to move. I was rooted to the spot, staring at her with growing terror, as she slowly took a step backward, vanishing into the darkness from where she had emerged. I turned toward the door, desperate to escape, but when I looked, the door was gone. Instead, I was facing a massive mirror, its surface cold and glassy. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't the same as it had been just a moment ago. My own face was twisted with terror, my eyes wide and my mouth frozen in a silent scream. I reached out to touch the glass, but the reflection did not move with me. It remained static, staring back at me with that same twisted fear. I screamed, but no sound came out. Instead, my own voice echoed from the mirror, calling me, coaxing me closer. "Come back," it whispered. "Come back to me." I turned, frantic, trying to find an exit, but the cabin had transformed into a labyrinth, the walls pressing on me, the mist swirling thicker as the whispers continued, louder now, surrounding me. Each step I took, the whispers grew stronger. They were all echoes of my own voice, distorted and begging me to follow them, to come closer, to stay. Eventually, the mirror grew closer to me, as if it was pulling me in. I tried to tear my gaze away, but it was like my eyes were locked onto reflection. The woman's voice echoed again, still sounding like mine. "Don't follow me." The words twisted around me, wrapping me in a suffocating grip. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time no longer made sense. I only know that eventually my body gave into the overwhelming force. My legs moved of their own accord, as if they were being drawn toward the mirror. Each step felt heavier than the last, my mind screaming to turn around to flee, but my body wouldn't obey. I felt my hand reach out to the glass, felt the coldness of it seep into my skin, and then I felt nothing. I awoke in the forest, disoriented, with no recollection of how I had gotten there. The mist had cleared, the storm had passed, and the forest was eerily quiet. I looked around, but there was no sign of the cabin. It was as if it had never existed at all. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I searched for information about the cabin, determined to understand what had happened. What I found chilled me to the core. The cabin had been abandoned years ago after a tragic incident. 2 women had gone missing in the forest, both of them hikers. One was found dead, her neck twisted at an unnatural angle, her body contorted in ways no human body should be. But the other woman had vanished without a trace. The locals spoke of a cursed loop, a place where the souls of the lost wander forever. They said that those who ventured too close to the mirror inside the cabin would find themselves trapped in an endless echo, unable to escape their own reflections, endlessly reliving the moment they saw themselves, lost and forever calling for themselves to return. I never hiked again after that day. I couldn't bring myself to. But every night, I hear it, a whisper in the dark, Faint and haunting, but unmistakable. It's my own voice, calling me back to the forest, to the cabin, to the mirror. Come back, it whispers, just loud enough for me to hear. And I know, deep down, that no matter how far I run, the echoes will always be there, calling me back.